Hi everyone. For those who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those who've been here before, thank you very much for joining me again. In my last video, I reviewed the Illuminated Tarot, which is a full tarot deck folded into 53 playing cards. Today, I want to talk about 4 other decks that are also comprised of less than 78 cards. I call these my Truncated Tarot decks. The first of these 4 decks is the Double Major Tarot. Although there are 76 cards in this deck, it's missing more than just 2 cards. In fact, it's missing all 40 pip cards of the Minor Arcana. Instead, this deck is made up of 2 sets of Major Arcana and 2 sets of court cards. For each set, the first version is either a replica of or very similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. As for the second set, there isn't a clear consistency on how they differ from the original. But what do I mean by that? Well, in some, but not all the alternate versions, the way they differ from the traditional RWS imageries reminds me of a deck called the After Tarot. In this deck, the images show what happens to those iconic characters moments after the scenes were captured. In the double majors, we see that the High Priestess has left her throne and is about to cross the veil. The lovers have started a life together, and they sustain themselves through the domestication of animals. And the dead, risen by the angel of judgment, is led to their final resting place. But not all cards show a positive conclusion to the RWS scenes. The careless fool has now fallen off the cliff. The charioteer can't reach his destination because he chose an unreliable partner. And the lady we once associate with strength has been brought down by her hubris in thinking that she can tame a mighty lion. Furthermore, not all cards present a follow-up scene. I feel like some of these alternate cards gives us another glimpse of these characters' personality. It's as though what we see in the RWS deck is them posing for picture, while the second version is who they truly are when they think no one is watching. Here, we see that the magician is bored when he's not putting on a show. The Empress, a mother to all, is childishly playful. The wise hermit experiences moments of loneliness. This idea that the alternate cards show who these characters are when no one is watching is most prominent in the court cards. The King of Cups feels overwhelmed, and the Knight is a drunkard. The Queen of Swords can be vain, and the King of Pentacles can be greedy. But again, not all is negative. The Knight of Swords, who we often associate with rashness, shows that he is able to calmly assess his environment. The Queen of Wands is gentle and playful. While I think this is an interesting deck, I don't find it particularly useful because it doesn't read very well for me. Personally, I think this deck is more of an artistic endeavor than anything else. It feels like the creator aimed to create something cute and whimsy, but not a practical tool. And this may sound a little snooty, but I can't help but think that the creator has a rather shallow understanding of tarot. One card in particular that really gave me this impression is Temperance. The guidebook describes the traditional version of Temperance as indecision. It says that she isn't using her wings because she doesn't know where to go, and she's moving the water back and forth between the cups, quote unquote, boringly. While I generally appreciate different interpretations of the cards, this feels like a misunderstanding rather than a different one. Having that said, I really do like having 2 versions of the court cards. To me, this is the best part of the deck. I often feel that court cards are the hardest to interpret because, aside from the knights, they don't reveal much about these people's personalities. These second versions of these people on this deck, on the contrary, is quite descriptive. These are a set of twin decks, each containing 56 cards. Both are playing card decks that can be read as tarot. One focuses on the major arcana, while the other focuses on the minor arcana. The Major Arcana version reminds me of this Illuminated Tarot, which I reviewed in my last video. In both these decks, the majors are folded into the playing card deck. With the illuminated deck, the majors are associated with the minors that best mirror the major in terms of their core meaning, all the while making attempt to have some numerical cohesion. For example, card 17, the star, is paired with the 7 of diamonds, thus both contain the number 7. Likewise, card 18, the moon, is paired with the 8 of hearts. With the Oculus Major Arcana, the organization follows a much simpler structure. Here, every ace, 10, and court card doubles as a Major Arcana. As this is only 5 cards in each suit, this only totals 20 cards. So where are the last 2 cards of the Major Arcana? Well, Fool and Death lie outside of this structure. In addition, there are also 2 extra cards in this deck. The first is an extra Ace of Spades. This card is also called the Architect. On this card, there's an inscription that reads, "Coming of the day when that which is hidden shall be revealed." The second additional card is called the White Rabbit. Personally, I really like the major and minor pairings in this deck. I find it interesting that, in spite of the fact that the pairing is very limited due to the nature of its organizational structure, meaning that they can only be paired with the aces, tens, and court, the end result is still very, very apt. The minor arcana of this deck is not quite as clever. This deck is a simple and straightforward correspondence of the suits. The wands corresponds to the clubs, the cups with the hearts, the swords with spades, and pentacles with diamonds. The 4 extra cards in this deck are simply the pages of each suit. The thing I like most about the minor deck is how the suit symbols are designed. From cards 2 through 10, the suit symbols on the 2 diagonal corners fill up a little with each number. There are also 2 rows of suit symbols that get filled in with each increment. Using the spades as an example, you can see how only the bottom of the stem is colored in, and in the scroll underneath it, only 2 spades are colored. In the 3 by comparison, 2/3 of the stem has now been filled in, and in the 4, it's completely filled in. This continues until the entire spade is colored in. Because the card backs of these 2 decks are the same, you can actually just remove the pip cards from the major deck, combine the remainder with the minor deck, and get a full traditional tarot deck. While I appreciate having the ability to do so, I prefer to keep them separate. I have, however, used both decks at the same time. I've used them for questions that involve choosing between 2 options and questions regarding how the past affects the present. And as I like to try to predict outcomes of TV shows that I'm currently watching, I've also tried to use these decks to predict the interactions between 2 characters. My final verdict is that these cards aren't necessarily better for these types of questions, but they aren't bad either. What they are to me is primarily fun. In addition to having a different structure, the artwork is also cute and whimsical, giving the overall experience a very lighthearted feel. Another thing that I would note is that even though these are twin decks, they are currently sold separately on the creator's website. While I recommend getting both just to have the complete set, if you are going to get just one, I would definitely choose the major deck. Like the double major, the hybrid tarot is a deck with only majors and court cards, and yet it is so much more than that. In fact, of all the decks I own, this one probably has the most intricate system. Instead of being merely a truncated tarot, this 42 cards deck contains 3 separate established forms of cartomancy. It is a tarot, Lenormand, and oracle deck all in one. As mentioned earlier, the tarot portion of this deck contains 22 cards in the traditional major arcana and 16 court cards. This adds up to 38 cards. The Lenormand portion of this deck contains 36 traditional cards plus an extra lady and gentleman. This also adds up to 38 cards. In both systems, there are 4 extra cards. In the tarot portion, they are the 4 elements. Each of these elemental cards stand in for an entire pip set of their suits. In its Lenormand correspondence, each of these cards represent an aspect of the fundamental human experience: motivation, feel, think, and action. Finally, in the oracles portion of this deck, each card represents a god, hero, or a mythical being from various cultures around the world. The tarot and Lenormand pairings are based on similarity of symbolisms. Sometimes this leads to a similar interpretation, and sometimes it doesn't. The most obvious example of cards matched by their symbols are the Tower, Star, Moon, and Sun. For the remaining cards, the creators were able to find significant symbols in each tarot card to complement its Lenormand counterpart. For example, the tarot's Fool is matched to the Lenormand's dog because there is a dog that follows the Fool. The High Priestess is paired with books. Even though she holds a scroll in the traditional tarot deck, I still think this is a good pairing. Also, as mentioned earlier, there are 2 sets of Lenormand people cards. The first set is paired with the Empress and Emperor. The second set is paired with the King and Queen of Wands. What I love most about this portion of the deck is that these 4 cards come together to make one looping image. Another feature of this deck that I really appreciate is that the Lenormand portion includes the playing card insets. While the traditional 36 cards occupy the kings through sixes, the 4 additional cards possess the fives. As this part of the Lenormand tradition is often left out in modern decks, it always feels like a treat when I find a deck that includes it. I absolutely adore reading with this deck. I love the clever intricacies, as well as the vast culture found within it. In terms of reading with this deck, it does take a while to get used to. With the Oculus decks and the Illuminated Tarot, while they are also paired with another system, that other system is the simple playing cards, which share a very similar structure to Tarot, and therefore can be read similarly. With this deck, pairing Tarot with Lenormand can create some confusion, especially for cards like the Tower, because they offer drastically different meanings. And to be completely honest, the accuracy and usefulness of the readings I get with this deck are hit and miss. But regardless of the outcome of the reading itself, the process is always very enjoyable. While none of these are my go-to decks, they do have a special place in my collection due to how unique and interesting they are. I don't take them too seriously and pull them out primarily when I'm in a playful mood, most likely when I'm watching anime or sci-fi. I would recommend them to those who enjoy decks that lean on the intellectual side, as they do stimulate another part of the brain than standard tarot decks. This is especially true for the hybrid tarot. Working with it for the first time felt like doing mental somersaults, and I love that feeling. I hope you found these decks interesting as well. Drop a comment to let me know what you think. And while you're at it, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel for more tarot related content. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.